Williams, who had been silently listening, finally posed a question. If you like me, why didn't you say anything while I was pretending to be crippled? Why wait until now? Blessing quickly responded, I was waiting for the right moment. I didn't want to interfere while you were figuring things out with Olivia. Williams' expression grew serious as he had heard enough. Get out. He said firmly, I know what you are doing, Blessing. You are just after my money. You are spoiled and selfish, nothing more than a gold digger. Blessing's face flushed with anger and humiliation. He hadn't expected Williams rejecting her so bluntly. She stormed out of the house, embarrassed and upset. As she left, she muttered curses under her breath, blaming Olivia for everything. Blessing thought, if it weren't for Olivia, I could have had Williams. This passed, and Williams tried everything he could to persuade Olivia and James to accompany him to the city. He apologized repeatedly, explaining that he never intended to hurt them, but the damage was done. Olivia couldn't trust him anymore, and James felt betrayed. No matter what Williams said, they couldn't view him the same way. Williams felt sadder and more lost than ever. His family, who had shown him genuine kindness, didn't care about his wealth. They welcomed him, provided him with food, and treated him like family when they believed he had nothing. It was the love he had always desired, but now, due to his deceit, he had ruined everything. One morning, Williams decided it was time to leave the village. He knew that staying any longer could cause more pain. He couldn't bear to see the hurt in Olivia's eyes or the disappointment in James' face. So with a heavy heart, he packed his belongings and prepared to return to the city. Before he left, William sat in the house one last time, reminiscing about all the moments he had shared with Olivia and her father, the laughter, the warmth, and the hope that he could have something real with them. It was difficult for him to walk away from the only family that had ever truly loved him. As Williams walked down the road, leaving the house behind, he looked back one final time, his heart aching, knowing that this place had once felt like home. The love he had searched for his entire life had been here, and he lost it due to his lies. With the sun setting in the distance, the village slowly fading behind him, his mind was filled with regrets. No amount of money could fill the emptiness he felt now. The love he had ruined was something that money couldn't buy. As Williams distanced himself from Olivia's home, her heart shattered. Tears streamed down her face as she cried for hours. She had fallen in love with Williams despite everything, and now he was gone. Her mind swelled with regrets. She questioned why she had let him go and why she had allowed her anger to push him away. Though he had lied about his identity, she knew deep down that he had a good heart. She had seen the kindness in his eyes and felt the warmth of his presence. Now, all that was gone, and she couldn't help but feel she had made a terrible mistake. Back in the city, William's mother was the first to see him upon his return to their mansion. The moment she laid eyes on her son, she ran to him with her arms wide open. She hugged him tightly, tears of relief in her eyes. Thank God you are back, she exclaimed, holding him close. We were so scared. Where have you been? William sighed deeply and sat down to explain everything. He told her about the village, how he had pretended to be a beggar to find true love, and how he had met Olivia and her father. He described their kindness, how they had cared for him, and how he had fallen in love with Olivia. His mother listened quietly, her heart softening with every word. She felt pity for her son, understanding how much this family had meant to him. When Williams finished his story, his mother looked at him with sadness in her eyes. I'm sorry, Williams. It sounds like they truly care for you. But life can be cruel sometimes. Maybe it's for the best. You will find love again, I'm sure. But then the front door opened and William's father entered. He was a tall, stern man, a successful businessman and politician, respected in the political realm. His father had focused on one goal for the past year, becoming governor. He had connections, plans, and strategies to ensure his victory in the upcoming election, and for him, everything was falling in place, except for one thing: William's marriage. William's father barely glanced at him. Before heading straight to his study, Williams followed, knowing he had to explain everything. When he reached his father's office, he stood by the door, waiting for his father to acknowledge him. "Father, I'm back," Williams said. His father nodded without looking up from his papers. "So, you finally decided to return. Where have you been all this time?" Williams recounted the entire situation again, hoping for some understanding, but as he spoke, his father's expression remained cold and indifferent. When Williams finished, his father leaned back in his chair and crossed his arm. "Good," his father said after a moment of silence. "I'm glad she rejected you." Williams was taken aback. "What? I never supported this nonsense from the beginning," his father continued. "Going off to a village pretending to be someone you are not, or to find true love. It was foolish." William's heart sank. He had hoped for at least a little sympathy from his father, but he should have known better. His father had never cared about love or emotions. For him, everything was about business and connections. "Listen to me, Williams," his father said sharply. "You are my only son, and I have a lot riding on you. I have already made plans for you to marry Chief Peter's daughter. You know this. Chief Peter is key to me winning the governorship election, and I won't let anyone stand in the way of that. You must marry her, or I will not take it lightly with you." William's chest tightened with anger and frustration. "But I don't love her. I don't even know her." His father slammed his fist on the desk, causing papers to scatter. "This is not about love. This is about power, about our family's future. Chief Peter's daughter will secure my position as governor, and you will marry her whether you like it or not. Are you doing this because you are my only son? You think you can just make any decision you want?" William stood there speechless. He had always known that his father was controlling, but this was too much. His father was willing to sacrifice his happiness just to secure his political future. "You have one job, Williams," his father continued, "and that is to marry Chief Peter's daughter. I don't care about this girl from the village. Forget about her. She is nothing compared to what you could have." Without another word, Williams turned and exited the room, his mind in turmoil. He realized he was battling not only with his father, but also with himself. Could he truly defy his father's wishes and follow his heart, or will he be trapped in a life he didn't want just to satisfy his father's ambition? Williams couldn't bear it any longer. The weight of his father's expectations and the pressure to marry a woman he didn't love became unbearable. One evening, he approached his mother and informed her that he was leaving for the village. He couldn't envision his life without Olivia and her father, who had shown him kindness beyond anything he had experienced. He explained to his mother that he wanted to be with them, to live a simple life, free from the pressures of his father's political plans. His mother, worried, tried to persuade him to stay, explaining how dangerous it was to defy his father and how family's future was at stake. But Williams wasn't listening. His heart was set on Olivia. The thought of losing her again made him sick, and the idea of living his life with someone else was unbearable. He quietly packed his belongings, and before his father returned home that night, Williams was already on his way back to the village. When he arrived at Olivia's home, she was surprised but overjoyed. Her heart leaped when she saw him standing at the door. She had missed him terribly and feared she would never see him again. Tears welled in her eyes as she welcomed him back into their modest home. That night, they sat together, discussing their future and the suffering they had both endured in his absence. Williams felt he had made the right choice. His heart felt lighter now that he was with the woman he loved. Meanwhile, back Back in the city, William's father returned home and learned from his wife that their son had left. He was furious, pacing back and forth, yelling that he would send his men to the village the next day to drag Williams back, whether he liked it or not. His wife, seeing his anger, tried to calm him down, knowing how much Williams meant to them and how stubborn her husband could be. That night, she sat down and suggested they take a different approach. Instead of forcing Williams back, she proposed allowing him to bring Olivia and her father to the city. Once they were there, she could offer them a large sum of money to leave their son alone. William's father, still sitting with anger, paused for a moment. His wife's plan made sense to him. After all, everyone had a price. He believed that once Olivia and her father saw the money, they would be eager to disappear and let Williams return to the life they had planned for him. Reluctantly, he agreed to let his wife handle the situation. She assured him that everything would be fine and that they would have their son back, focusing on their family's future. William's father calmed down, convinced that money would solve everything, but in her heart, William's mother knew that things wouldn't be so simple. She had seen the love in her son's eyes when he spoke about Olivia. The next day, William's mother called him and told him that he could bring Olivia and her father to the city. Williams couldn't contain his joy. He quickly shared the good news with Olivia, who told her father, James, about it. James, who had never been to the city in his entire life, gladly agreed to go. He was excited about the chance to see a new world and grateful for all the help William's family was offering. When they arrived in the city, William's father sat James down with a calm voice, explaining that he had bought them a house and arranged a business for him so he couldn't have to work on the farm anymore. James, overwhelmed with happiness, thanked William's father profusely. He had never thought such kindness would come his way. With renewed hope in his heart, he and Olivia moved into their new home. However, one afternoon, things took a dark turn. William's father visited Olivia alone. His expression cold. He told her that now that he had settled them with a house and a business, they must stay away from his son. He warned her that if she and her father didn't listen, they would disappear and no one would dare ask what had happened. Fear gripped Olivia as she listened to these threatening words. She didn't know what to do. Shaken with fear, she called Williams and told him everything. Furious, Williams confronted his father immediately. He couldn't believe that after all the promises, his father could betray him like this. Without wasting time, Williams went straight to Chief Peter's house. He looked Chief Peter in the eyes and declared that he would never marry his daughter, no matter what. To strengthen his point, he even lied, claiming that his girlfriend Olivia was already pregnant with his child. This news hit Chief Peter like a ton of bricks. His face turned red with anger, unable to fathom that Williams had rejected his daughter so harshly. Chief Peter stormed out of the house and went straight to Williams' father. Filled with rage, he informed him that he would never support him in his run for governorship election. Without Chief Peter's influence, Williams' father's dream of becoming governor was shattered. Chief Peter made it clear that he wanted nothing more to do with the family and left angrily, leaving William's father in shock and disbelief. After his argument with Chief Peter, William's father was furious. Desperate to salvage his political career, he tried calling the chief several times, but every time, Chief Peter refused to pick up. Frustration boiled within him, and his anger turned to Williams. He warned Williams that if he lost the election, there could be consequences that Williams couldn't even imagine. Williams remained firm, knowing he had chosen love over his father's ruthless ambition. The day of the election finally arrived, and Williams' father anxiously waiting for the results. However, when the announcement came, it shattered all his hope. He had lost, and the opposing political party had won the governorship seats. Without Chief Peter's support, he had no chance. The defeat filled him with rage. His dreams of power, wealth, and influence had crumbled, and he blamed Williams for it all. Blinded by anger, Williams' father made a horrible decision. He sent his men to James' house with orders to teach them a lesson. That night, they arrived at James' modest home and brutally attacked the poor man. beating him so severely that he fainted, lying motionless on the floor. When they finally left, it was a cruel act of revenge for something James had no control over. Later that evening, when Olivia returned from the market, she found her father lying on the floor, unconscious and barely breathing. Panic surged through her. She screamed for help and, with the assistance of some neighbors, rushed him to the hospital. Tears streamed down her face as they drove as fast as they could. At the hospital, the doctor quickly assessed James and went to work. After what felt like hours, the doctor emerged and informed Olivia that if she hadn't brought him when she did, her father wouldn't have survived. It was a miracle he was still alive. Williams rushed to the hospital as soon as he heard the news. When he saw James lying in the hospital bed, bruised and weak, his heart sank. This was the man who had welcomed him into his home, and the man who had cared for him without knowing his true identity. Seeing James like this broke something inside Williams. He couldn't hold back his tears. He knew this was all his father's doing, and it filled him with guilt and sorrow. The only family that had ever shown him real love was suffering because of him. Olivia sat by her father's bedside, holding his hand and silently crying. Williams joined her, his heart heavy with the weight of everything that has transpired. He knew he had to make things right, but at the moment, all he could do was sit with Olivia and pray that James would survive. When Williams returned home after the emotional day at the hospital, he was filled with anger and pain. His heart pounded at every thought of Olivia's father lying in the hospital bed, barely clinging to life. He couldn't take it anymore. His father's greed and cruelty had gone too far. In a fit of rage, Williams stormed into his storeroom and pulled out a sharp cutlass. His hands trembled with a mix of fury and determination. For the first time in his life, he felt ready to confront his father no matter the cost. Williams marched into his father's study, where the older man sat with a glass of whiskey in his hand. Still sitting from his election loss, the door burst open, startling his father as he looked up. William stood in the doorway, holding the sharp cutlass firmly in his hand. His face darkened with anger. Without a word, Williams raised the cutlass and aimed it directly at his father. The shock on his father's face was instantaneous. He had never seen Williams like this. His son, who had always been so obedient and respectful, was now standing before him, threatening him with a cutlass. Williams' voice was cold and steady, a tone his father had never heard from him before. "If Olivia's father dies," Williams said slowly, "then you will die too." His words sliced through the air like a knife. For a moment, his father sat frozen, unable to speak. The weight of his son's words hit him hard. This wasn't a joke. Williams wasn't bluffing. There was a deadly seriousness in his eyes, a rage that his father had never imagined could exist within him. Finally, Williams' father spoke, his voice trembling. "Williams, please, put the cutlass down. You don't want to do this." But Williams didn't move. His grip on the cutlass remained firm, and his eyes stayed locked on his father. "You've done enough," Williams continued. "Because of you, an innocent man is lying in the hospital, fighting for his life, all because of your greed and your need for control. If he doesn't make it, I swear you will pay for it with your own life." His father felt a wave of guilt wash over him. He had always pushed Williams to follow his rules, his plans, his vision for the family's future. He had never cared about Williams' feeling or what he wanted for his own life. Now, looking at the anger and the pain on his son's face, he realized he had pushed too far. He had broken something inside Williams. Tears welled up in his father's eyes, something Williams had never seen before. The old man lowered his head in shame. "Williams, I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean for things to go this far. I didn't want anyone to get hurt. I just wanted you to have the life I thought was best for you." But Williams wasn't moved. "You've never cared about what's best for me. You've only cared about what's best for yourself." "Well, I'm done. If James dies, you will see just how far I'm willing to go. William's father nodded slowly, realizing the depth of his son's pain and the seriousness of the situation. He couldn't lose his only son, not like this, for the first time in his life. William's father felt true fear, not just of the cutlass, but of losing his son for good. He looked at Williams, the boy he had raised, now standing before him like a stranger. The realization hit him that he had pushed too far for too long. He had taken everything for granted. His greed and hunger for power had led him to this moment, and he had no one to blame but himself. Slowly, he raised his hands, showing Williams that he meant no harm. Williams, he said, his voice softer now, put the cutlass down. I will fix this. I promise I won't let anything happen to James. William's face remained hard, but he could see the change in his father's expression. The guilt was there, but the damage had already been done. He lowered the cutlass slightly, but his voice stayed cold. Fixing this won't bring back the trust you've broken. William said, you can't undo what you have done. His father nodded, understanding that words wouldn't make up for everything. I know, he whispered, but I will try. I'll call off my men. I'll make sure James gets the best care. I'll make things right. William stood there, still breathing heavily. The cutlass now lowered completely. He doesn't know if he could trust his father's promises, but he didn't want more violence. Slowly, he placed them down on the table between them. His father felt a breath of relief, but didn't dare move. I will hold you to your word, William said firmly. If anything happens to Olivia's father, I will never forgive you. I will never come back. His father nodded again, more tears forming in his eyes. I understand, son. I won't let you down this time. I promise. William turned and walked out of the room, leaving his father sitting there in silence, overwhelmed by guilt and regret. For the first time, the weight of his actions truly hit him. He had nearly lost his only son, and worse, he had harmed a family that had done nothing but show kindness to Williams. As Williams walked out of the house into the night, he felt a storm of emotions. He wanted to believe his father, but years of disappointment made it hard. The only thing he knew for sure was that he had to protect Olivia and her father. They were the only people who had ever treated him like a real person, not like a trophy or a symbol of wealth. He made his way back to the hospital to check on James. When he arrived, he found Olivia still by her father's side, holding his hand, tears in her eyes. She looked up when she saw Williams and gave him a sad smile. Is everything okay? She asked, her voice soft and tired. Williams nodded, though his heart was still heavy. I made sure my father won't hurt your family again. I promise you are safe now. Olivia looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. She didn't say anything, just squeezed her father's hand a little tighter. Williams sat down next to her, taking her other hand in his. For a moment, they sat in silence, just two people, trying to find some peace in the chaos. The love between them was real, but the challenges they faced were greater than either of them had imagined. Yet, in that moment, they knew they had each other and someone that gave them strength. The following day, William's father arrived at the hospital, burdened with regret. He had spent the night reflecting on how his greed had nearly destroyed the only family that had shown his son genuine love. When he entered James' room, the atmosphere felt charged with tension. Olivia sat beside her father's bed, while William stood by the window, his back turned. Although still weak, James managed a faint smile upon seeing William's father. He had heard the story from Olivia and recognized that the older man was partly responsible for his condition. However, James, always humble and forgiving, believed in giving people second chances. William's father hesitated briefly before approaching James' bed. He looked at the man who had suffered because of him and felt a deep shame born within. Clearing his throat, he spoke softly. I'm sorry, James, he said in a low voice. I've made terrible mistakes. I let my ambition blind me, and I hurt you and your family. I'm not proud of my actions, but I want to make amends. James, still too weak to speak much, simply nodded. Olivia watched her father intently, waiting for his response. She had never seen him angry before and wondered if he could forgive someone who had caused him so much harm. After a lengthy pause, James finally said, "Life is short." His voice was hoarse but steady. "There is no room for grudges. What matters now is ensuring my daughter is happy and that your son is happy too." William's father nodded, relieved. He had never met someone as kind as James, and he promised himself that he would do whatever it took to help his family from that moment on. Meanwhile, in the village, things were changing for Blessing. For months, she had been proud and boastful, flaunting her beauty and hoping to marry into wealth. But after her fallout with Olivia and Julius, she felt increasingly isolated. Her plan to help Julius win Olivia's heart had failed, and in the process, she had alienated herself from everyone. Then, a man appeared seemingly out of nowhere. He arrived in the village, dressed in expensive clothes and driving a shiny car, claiming to be a wealthy businessman looking for a wife. Eager to prove that she could still win someone over, Blessing quickly fell for his charms. He spoke of a large house in the city, cars, and a luxurious life. Blessing was blinded by her desire for wealth, and before long, they were engaged. The man promised to take her to the city after the wedding, and Blessing was convinced her dream had finally come true. However, there was a dark secret behind this man's sudden appearance. He was not a wealthy businessman at all. In fact, he was a poor roadside mechanic. He had heard about Blessing through Julius, who had grown bitter and angry after being rejected by Olivia. Julius had paid this man to deceive Blessing as a form of revenge for all the money she had taken from him, always promising to help win Olivia, but never delivering. By the time the man came to her village for traditional wedding, Blessing was both pregnant and unaware of his true identity. She was excited about the future, ready to leave the village and live the life she had always dreamed of. However, when they finally moved to the city after the wedding, the truth struck her like a thunderbolt. Instead of a mansion, they arrived at a small rundown shack near a noisy mechanic garage. There were no cars, no wealth, no luxury, only grease, noise, and hard labor. The man, now revealed as a poor mechanic, had no money, no business, and no intention of caring for Blessing the way she had envisioned. He had used Julius' money to lure her in, and now she felt trapped. Blessing cried for days, realizing she had been deceived. But what made it worse was that she was already months pregnant with the mechanic's child. There was no escaping her fate now. She had spent so much time looking down on others, only to end up in a worse situation that she had ever imagined. She looked at herself for her greed, for allowing herself to be duped, and for turning her back on the people who had once been her friends. Now she found herself stuck in a small miserable home with a man she didn't love, carrying his child, and with no way out. The city life she had dreamed of had become a nightmare, and she had no one to blame but herself. As the months went by, Blessing's bitterness deepened. She regretted everything: the way she had treated Olivia, the choices she had made for money, and most of all, falling for a lie. But now, it was too late. She was months pregnant, tied to a man she didn't love. A month after William's and Olivia's wedding, their lives seemed to flourish with happiness. Months later, Olivia discovered she was pregnant, and the news filled Williams with excitement. He could hardly believe he was going to be a father. He hugged Olivia tightly, his heart overflowing with joy. He had everything he had ever wanted: a loving wife, and now a baby on the way. When William's mother heard the news, she was equally excited. Despite the rocky beginning between her and Olivia, she was now genuinely happy for her son and could hardly wait to meet her grandchild. She sent gifts and called Olivia frequently, ensuring she had everything she needed. One day, Williams was overwhelmed with work work and meetings. Olivia didn't want to disturb him, so she decided to drive herself to her antenatal appointment, confident that she could manage it. She kissed Williams goodbye and left the house with a smile. As Olivia drove down the road, her car suddenly began making strange noises and came to a complete stop. She attempted to restart the engine, but it couldn't budge. Remaining calm, she got out of the car and surveyed her surroundings. Across the road, she spotted a small mechanic shop, so she decided to walk over to get some assistance. As she crossed the road, she noticed a woman by the roadside eating a loaf of bread. The woman's clothes were tattered and her heart was messy. When Olivia took a closer look, she couldn't believe her eyes. It was Blessing, her former friend. Blessing looked up and immediately recognized her. Olivia. Her eyes widened in shock as she took in Olivia's appearance, her beautiful dress, glowing skin, and the evident signs of happiness in her life. Tears welled up in Blessing's eyes. She never imagined she could see Olivia again, especially not in such a transformed state. Blessing began to cry, her voice shaking, as she explained everything to Olivia. She had lost everything after the betrayal by Julius. Her life spiraled out of control, and she ended up with a man who lied about his wealth. By the time she discovered the truth, she was already pregnant. He abandoned her, leaving Blessing with no one to turn to. Since then, she had been living on the streets, struggling to survive. Olivia listened quietly, feeling a mix of pity and sadness for Blessing. Despite everything that had happened between them, she couldn't ignore the pain in Blessing's voice. Before she left, Olivia pulled out a checkbook, wrote a generous amount, and handed it over to Blessing. Use this to start a business, Blessing. Olivia said softly. I hope it helps you get back on your feet. Blessing was overwhelmed with gratitude. She couldn't believe that Olivia, the same woman she had once mocked, was now helping her in her time of need. With tears in her eyes, she thanked Olivia over and over. Olivia smiled gently, walked back to her car. After getting help from the mechanic, she drove off, feeling a sense of peace for having assisted Blessing. Later that evening, when Williams got home, Olivia recounted everything that had happened. Williams listened and then said, "It's good you helped her. It's never right to look down on others. Life can change in unexpected ways." Olivia nodded, knowing that her kindness had made a difference, not just for Blessing, but for herself as well. In the end, the story teaches us that true love and kindness come from the heart, not from wealth or status. Money cannot buy genuine love, and it's important to value people for who they are, not for what they have. Williams discovered that his true happiness stemmed from embracing love and compassion rather than hiding behind his wealth. Olivia's kindness and willingness to help others show that caring for people is what truly matters in life. Dear beautiful viewers, what lesson did you take away from this dramatic tale? I would love to hear from you. I would like to know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, give us a thumbs up, share it with friends, and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to turn on notification so you never miss out on our latest updates on The African Tales. Thank you for watching. Stay blessed and positive, and remember to be kind to others. I will see you in another story. Till then, bye for now.